There's a particular silence that exists only in the presence of someone you're trying not to want. It's not empty, it's thick, charged, like the air before a storm. And in the center of that silence was Alara. I met her at a gallery opening I was working, just the hired help moving paintings under the direction of men in softer shoes. She was standing in front of a violent splash of crimson, a still point in the swirling crowd. Mid-40s, with a grace that seemed less practiced and more a part of her skeleton. She wasn't just looking at the painting, she was absorbing it, her head tilted, a single finger resting on her lower lip. Our first touch was an accident. I was adjusting a spotlight, backing up, and my shoulder brushed against hers. A jolt, simple and direct, like touching a live wire. I jerked away. Sorry. I'm so sorry. She turned, and her eyes, the color of weathered slate, didn't skin me or dismiss me. They held. A small, knowing smile touched the corners of her mouth. It's all right, she said, her voice a low, melodic thing that cut through the gallery's murmur. It's a crowded room. That was the line, drawn in invisible ink right there. Me, the kid with the tools. Her, the woman who belonged with the art. But the night had other plans. A sudden, summer downpour trapped the guests inside long after the champagne ran dry. I was packing cables when the gallery owner, flustered, asked if I could wait with the space until the security lead arrived. Just an hour, mate. Alara has offered to keep you company. And just like that, we were alone. The cavernous room felt suddenly intimate, the only light coming from the emergency spots, casting long, dramatic shadows. The rain drummed a frantic rhythm on the glass roof. She stood by the window, watching the city lights blur and swim. It's like the world is washing away, she murmured, not turning around. I just nodded, my throat too tight for words. I busied myself with my coil of cables, the rubber suddenly feeling alive in my hands. She moved to the coffee station, her movements economical and sure. The machine's off. Cold brew? She asked, holding up a bottle. Sure. Thanks. Our fingers brushed during the handoff. This time, it wasn't an accident. It was a deliberate, fleeting point of contact. Her skin was cool from the bottle, but the place she touched felt branded. I saw her breath catch, just a slight hitch in her otherwise perfect composure. She looked down at her own hand as if it had betrayed her. We stood there, not drinking, just being. The space between us, maybe 5 feet, felt like a distance I could measure in heartbeats. I could smell her perfume, something like rain-soaked earth and vanilla, a scent that was the exact opposite of the sterile gallery air. She was the one who had gotten away from a life I couldn't even imagine. I was a momentary curiosity, a boy in a man's world. We had both drawn that line. But then she took a half-step closer. Just one. Her eyes lifted to mine, and in the dim light, they were full of a quiet, terrifying war. The rain, she whispered. It's not stopping. And in the breath that followed, the distant buzz of the intercom at the main door sliced through the room, sharp and final. The security guard was a blur of apologies and dripping raincoat, his keys jangling. He did a perfunctory loop of the gallery, completely oblivious to the charged atmosphere he'd just walked into. Alara had stepped back smoothly, the moment shattered, her expression retreating into a polite, unreadable mask. All secure, the guard announced. You two get home safe. We were ushered out into the damp, neon-streaked night. The rain had softened to a mist, making the city lights glow. We stood under the gallery's awning, the silence between us different now, awkward, pregnant with what had almost happened. My car is just... She gestured vaguely down the street. I'm the other way, I said, my hands shoved deep in my pockets. But neither of us moved. My last relationship, she said suddenly, the words quiet, almost lost in the city's hum. It was with a man who collected things. Art, cars, people. I was just another piece for his portfolio. She gave a dry, self-deprecating laugh. He was very appropriate. Our age, our social circle. A perfect empty fit. I understood what she wasn't saying. This, whatever this was between us, was the opposite of appropriate. I was a decade and a half too young broke, and my world was one of utility, not curation. I haven't. I started, then cleared my throat. I haven't been in many relationships. The ones I have, they felt like I was playing a part, saying lines I was supposed to say. She looked at me then, really looked, and I felt seen in a way that was both exhilarating and terrifying. It wasn't just my body she was seeing, it was the uncertainty, the quiet longing I tried to hide under a layer of cynicism. A shiver ran through her, a slight tremor she tried to suppress. Without thinking, I shrugged off my worn denim jacket. Here. I'm fine, she said automatically, the proud woman reasserting herself. I know, I replied softly. But it's right here. I held it out. She hesitated, then turned, allowing me to drape it over her shoulders. My knuckles, for a heartbeat, grazed the sensitive skin of her neck. She went perfectly still. Her breath hitched, a soft, warm cloud in the cool air that brushed against my wrist. The scent of her perfume, now mingled with the smell of my laundry detergent on the jacket, created something entirely new, something that belonged only to this moment. She pulled the jacket closed, her fingers clutching the fabric. Her shoulders relaxed under the weight of it. It was a surrender, small and profound. She didn't thank me. She just turned back, her eyes glistening in the misty dark, and offered a small, real smile that reached all the way to them. Which way did you say you were going? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. I'll walk you to your car, I said, the words leaving my mouth before my brain could veto them. She just nodded, a single, sharp dip of her chin, and we fell into step. The city was a watercolor around us, the pavement shimmering. We didn't speak. The only sound was the syncopated rhythm of our footsteps and the frantic thrum of my own heart. Her car was a sleek, dark sedan, looking utterly out of place on the gritty street. It was a symbol of her world, a world I wasn't part of. As we stopped beside it, the reality of the moment crashed down. This was the end of the line. She would get in, drive away, and I'd be left with the ghost of her perfume on my jacket. She turned to face me, my jacket dwarfing her frame, making her look younger, more vulnerable. Her keys were in her hand, a sharp, metallic gleam. Leo. She started, my name a whisper on her lips. It was the first time she'd said it. And then her phone buzzed. Not a ring, but a relentless, insistent vibration from her purse. We both flinched. The spell shattered. She fumbled for it, her fingers clumsy. The screen lit up her face, casting a bluish pallor. I saw the name flash, Martin. The ex, the collector. Her face tightened, a mask of weary obligation. She silenced it, her thumb pressing down hard, and shoved the phone back into her bag without looking at me. The silence that followed was heavy, charged with everything the phone call represented. The appropriate life waiting for her. I should. She gestured weakly at the car. Yeah, I said, my voice rough. But neither of us moved. We were trapped in the narrow space between the car and the building, close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from her. I could see the rapid pulse at the base of her throat. My gaze dropped to her lips, and I saw her breath catch. It was going to happen. The space between us evaporated. I saw the same desperate want in her eyes, warring with a deep, fearful hesitation. Her head tilted back just a fraction. I leaned in. But at the last possible second, her hand came up, not to push me away, but to press gently against my chest. Her palm was a brand over my heart, which was hammering against my ribs. We can't, she breathed, her eyes wide, pleading. You know we can't. I covered her hand with mine, holding it there, feeling the delicate bones under my fingers. We were frozen there, a statue of impossible desire. She was right. I knew she was right. But pulling away felt like tearing my own skin off. Instead of letting her go, my other hand came up, my fingers brushing a stray, damp strand of hair from her cheek. She leaned into the touch, her eyes fluttering closed for a second, a soft, broken sound escaping her. We weren't kissing. But in that suspended moment, holding onto each other as the city slept around us. We were closer than we had ever been to anyone. Her soft, broken sound was my undoing. It was the sound of a wall crumbling. "Ilara," I whispered, my voice raw. The hand on her cheek slid into her hair, cupping the back of her head. It was an anchor, a claim. "Tell me to stop. Tell me to walk away, and I will." I needed her to say it. To be the strong one. To reinforce the line we'd both drawn. But she didn't. Her eyes, dark and swimming with conflict, searched mine. The hand on my chest curled, her fingers clutching the fabric of my shirt, pulling me infinitesimally closer instead of pushing me away. "I can't," she breathed, the words a confession that seemed to cost her everything. "I can't be the one to think for both of us tonight. I'm so tired of thinking." That was all the permission I needed, and none of the absolution I craved. The world narrowed to the space between our bodies. The cool night air was no match for the heat coming off her. I could feel the fine tremor in her body where my hand cradled her head, the frantic beat of her heart echoing under my palm. The scent of rain and vanilla was an intoxicating cloud around us. My forehead rested against hers. Our breaths mingled, shallow and quick. I could feel the soft exhalation of her sigh against my lips. "This is a terrible idea," she murmured, her eyes fluttering closed. "I know," I said, my lips brushing against hers as I spoke, the lightest, most agonizing ghost of a touch. It was a question. And her answer was a surrender. Her body went pliant against mine, her free hand coming up to rest on my shoulder, her grip tight, almost desperate. The last of the space between us vanished. I felt the entire length of her lean against me, a perfect, shocking fit. The city, the rain, Martin, our ages, the entire complicated world, it all melted into a distant hum. There was only her breath on my skin, the silk of her hair between my fingers, the pounding of our hearts sinking into one frantic rhythm. My thumb stroked her jawline, tilting her face up just that final, decisive fraction. "Look at me," I whispered. Her eyelids, heavy with desire and fear, lifted. Her gaze was unfocused, dazed, and utterly honest. In the depths of her eyes, I saw the last of her resistance shatter. Our lips were a hair's breadth apart. I could already taste the promise of her. And then, from the dark interior of her car, her phone began to ring again. The phone's ring was a needle shredding the fragile fabric of the moment. It was Martin again, a ghost in the machine, refusing to be silenced. Ilara jerked back as if burned, her hand flying from my shoulder to her temple. The dazed, wanting look in her eyes was replaced by a sharp, panicked clarity. She fumbled for the car door handle, yanking it open as if escaping a fire. The interior light blinked on, illuminating the sleek, lonely space. The phone glowed on the passenger seat, the name Martin a relentless accusation. She didn't answer it. She just stood there, half in, half out of the car, her back to me, her shoulders rising and falling with ragged breaths. "He knows," she said, her voice hollow, stripped of its earlier melody. The words landed like a physical blow. "Knows what? He always knows." She turned, her face a mask of self-loathing. "When I'm unsettled. When my life isn't fitting into the perfect little boxes he designed for it. He calls. It's a sixth sense he has for my failures." I took a step forward, the wet pavement crunching under my boot. "Is that what this is? A failure? Isn't it?" Her laugh was brittle. "A younger man. A boy I picked up at a gallery. It's a cliché, Leo. A midlife crisis cliché. He'd have a field day." Her words were meant to push me away, to build the wall back up brick by painful brick. But I saw the truth in the way her hand trembled as she brushed her hair back. I saw it in the way she couldn't meet my eyes. This wasn't about Martin. This was about the story she was forcing herself to believe. I moved closer, into the space the open car door created. We were hidden from the street now, in our own little confessional. I didn't touch her. I just stood there, letting her feel my presence. "You didn't pick me up," I said, my voice low. "You looked at a painting. I looked at you. That's all it was." She finally looked at me, and the raw vulnerability in her gaze stole my breath. "It's not just him," she whispered, the confession torn from her. "It's everything. What would your friends say? Your family? I'm old enough to be." "Stop." The word was firm, but not unkind. My hand came up, and with a tenderness that felt like a vow, I traced the path a single tear had made down her cheek. Her eyes fluttered closed at the contact, a soft shudder running through her. "You're not a crisis. You're not a cliché. You're the first real thing I've felt in years." The phone finally stopped ringing. The silence it left behind was absolute, and in that silence, a decision was made. Not with words, but with the way her body leaned into my touch, the way her breath hitched. She reached past me, her arm brushing against my chest, and pushed the car door closed, plunging us back into the intimate dark of the alley. "Then stop talking," she said, her voice a husky command, and finally, her hands reached for me. Her hands, cool and sure, framed my face. There was no more hesitation in her touch, only a desperate, final certainty. The world beyond our alley ceased to exist. There was no Martin, no gallery, no age gap, no future and no past. There was only the feel of her palms against my jaw, the whisper of her thumbs stroking my cheekbones. "Ilara," I breathed, her name a prayer, a question, an answer. "Shh," she murmured, her eyes locked on mine, dark and bottomless pools of surrender. She pulled my face down to hers, but she didn't crash into me. She closed the distance with a devastating slowness that stole the air from my lungs. It was a giving, not a taking. Her lips met mine, and it was not a spark, but a floodgate opening. It was a kiss that felt less like a first kiss and more like a homecoming. It was soft, and searching, and tasted of cold coffee, rain, and the salt of her dried tears. Her fingers slid from my face into my hair, gripping with a quiet intensity, as if I were the only solid thing in a spinning world. My arms wrapped around her, pulling her flush against me, my jacket still draped over her shoulders, creating a tent that held our heat, our scent, our sudden, shocking privacy. We broke apart, gasping, only to come back together again, our foreheads resting against each other. Our breaths mingled in ragged clouds. "I've been so lonely," she whispered into the minute space between our mouths, the confession a sacred, shattered thing. "I know," I whispered back, my hands moving in slow circles on her back, feeling the delicate ridge of her spine through her dress. "Me too." It wasn't just about the physical want, though that was a live wire humming between us. It was the terrifying, exhilarating act of being truly seen. She saw the man I was, not the boy my age suggested. And I saw the woman she was beneath the grace and the composure, flawed, lonely, and fiercely alive. We stood there for a long time, holding each other in the dark alley, not kissing anymore, just breathing each other in. The tension that had coiled itself tighter and tighter through the night hadn't snapped, it had simply dissolved, replaced by a profound, quiet understanding. She finally leaned back, just enough to look at me. Her eyes were clear now, all the warring factions within her having reached a truce. She didn't smile. The moment was too significant for that. "Now what?" she asked, her voice hushed, raw with the weight of their new reality. I brushed my lips against her forehead, a seal, a promise. "No," I said. "We find out." We didn't go to her pristine apartment, or my cluttered shared house. Those places belonged to the other versions of ourselves, the ones who had drawn the line. Instead, we walked, her hand tucked securely in mine, fingers laced together, as if they'd always fit that way. We found an all-night diner, the kind with sticky vinyl booths and the smell of old coffee and grease, a world away from the gallery's chill. We slid into a booth, knees touching underneath the small formica table. The simple pressure was a constant, quiet reassurance. She shrugged off my jacket, finally, and folded it neatly beside her, a gesture that felt strangely domestic. "People will stare," she said, not with worry, but with a newfound defiance. She nodded slightly toward the window, our reflection a ghostly image in the glass. The elegant woman in the silk dress. The young man in a worn t-shirt. Let them, I said, and I meant it. A small, genuine smile, the first one I'd seen that held no shadows, finally graced her lips. I think I will. We ordered coffee we didn't need. She told me about the dream of opening her own small studio, a secret she'd kept locked away. I confessed my restless desire to create something with my hands, something more lasting than moving spotlights. The conversation wasn't charged with desperate, romantic heat anymore. It was warmer, deeper, a steady current of connection. It was the quiet after the storm. When the sun began to bleed a pale, gray light over the city, painting the streets in soft focus, I walked her back to her car. The alley looked different in the dawn, ordinary, stripped of its nighttime magic. But the feeling between us remained. She turned to face me, placing her hands on my chest, right over my heart. No regrets? She asked, her voice soft. I covered her hands with mine. Not one. She rose on her toes and pressed a kiss to my cheek, a slow, lingering touch that held the promise of a future. It was more intimate than any of our frantic kisses in the dark. It was a beginning. She got into her car and drove away. I stood there, watching until her taillights disappeared into the flow of the waking city. The air was cool, but I didn't feel the cold. I felt seen. I felt found. He was just a boy with a borrowed jacket. She was just a woman learning to be unafraid. And for the first time, that was more than enough. Did you enjoy the story? What kind of stories would you like to hear next?